All right, so to rehash this or to recap this thing, so I posted a question about a week ago saying, hey, and it was more directed at those who say, hey, there are that word that thou shalt not ever utter. What if it's spoken in a context?
What? Michael Briard's coming. Hold on.
Oh, hey, how about that? It's Michael Brulard.
Ah, there we are.
Yeah, look at that. That is an old picture. I can tell that's an old picture.
It's a really old picture.
Oh, look. All right. All right, Michael and Stephen. Oh.
Both of us in this room at the same time. It's never
ready to rumble. Oh, anyway,
it's never happened.
So to recap,
later at night.
Hold on, don't be in such a rush. Hold on. And besides, I want to change my screen so I can see everybody on the screen at the same time.
Oh, okay. I already got that going.
There we go.
So I get the suspicion that we're kind of in violent agreement on at least most of this, because you haven't said anything that I disagree with, but you have asked questions that I wasn't sure how they
relate to what you were saying.
Well, I wasn't sure how they in any way affected my thesis. You know what I'm saying? Like, your questions are legit, but they didn't really impact my thesis. My thesis is this: weaponized language, and I'm not just talking about any one word. I'm not even talking about just words. I mean language, like just any phrase or any word or phrase or combination of those that is intended to be a miniature form of terrorism, that is intended to target a demographic or target a vulnerable group or even a vulnerable person. Okay, so retard, N-word, misogynistic words, anti-Semitic language, homophobic or Islamophobic, any word or phrase that is intended to what's the word? Oppress and repress a group or an individual, I would say is weaponized. And any word can be weaponized. Obviously, we know which ones have been. Personally, I think the word bias is becoming weaponized against the media. But that's obviously a different category of weaponization. My thesis is that weaponized words should not be employed. And to be specific, when I say used, I mean employed. I mean like used, the way I've delineated it in the group there. Not to be examined and say, hey, listen, I think it was David Pinella that pointed out that there's a book, titled Nigger is the title of the book. Now, what am I supposed to not be able to say, hey, you need to read this book. It's titled N-word. Well, no, that's not the title of it. It was specifically titled to provoke and to say, well, only Black people should be able to state the title of that book. Really? That can't be right. That can't be right. So to say, okay, and on the other hand, to say, well, weaponized words are wrong for this demographic, but this demographic can use them. I posted a question in the thread that I did last week to Harold, which never got answered, and I'd be interested to hear both of your answers to it. Being a victim of I call it a crime or some sort of. Hi, Joel's coming in. So my
Casey, real quick,
like,
can I interrupt you real quick?
Yeah.
Can you stop sharing your screen and allow us all to put the video on?
I didn't realize I was sharing the screen.
Yes, that's how I was telling you it was on your computer.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Is that better? All right.
Hey, much better.
So, for example, if you were molested as a child, that doesn't give you license to molest children. To say, hey, well, I'm part of that, demographic. And similarly, why would being the target of abuse of words give you license to employ those abusive words towards members of even your own vulnerable demographic. I don't see the justification for that. And I never got an answer. So I'd be interested to hear.
That's a horrible comparison. And we're all, well, most of us are in relatively, hi Joelle, nice to meet you face to face.
Hi guys.
I'm glad you guys made it.
Do you remember the sweat hogs from Welcome Back, Kotter?
Yeah.
Okay. And it was I remember. But that was what they called each other. You know, that was their thing to be able to call each other. Kind of like you know, three quarters of the room is Marines. You know,
yeah, but it wasn't weaponized when they used it at all.
You know, calling each other jarheads has one meaning and level of acceptance. Depending on how some army guy might say you jarheads, might come across very, very differently. You know, because he's not one of us and has not earned it.
Okay, I mean, it's one thing to say, hey, care for us and all that, to be playfully, but I'm talking about like weaponized.
Hold on, let Mike in.
I think that you've both hit on my angle, but you've hit it from different angles. So I'm not a fan of the term weaponized words, only because I think it implies violence, and I strongly believe that words aren't violent. But I think the perspective really is, in what Casey keeps getting at, is the intent of the usage matters. It matters more than the utterance of the word. It's what the person intended when they're saying it. And I think Stephen just said the same thing, right? When the army guy says those effing jarheads, he's not using it in a way that is bringing camaraderie. He's putting the jarheads down, whereas Marines, we're busting chops. So to me, it really all comes down to, what does the person mean when they're using the word?
So now, Michael, you're saying what I just said about the NASCAR driver, you know, about that, and that whole thread about the NASCAR driver. That was my point, is when somebody says that, when I see somebody say it, I have to go through this whole, I instinctively go through this whole chain of mental gymnastics of, what did he mean? How often has he said it? Was he trying to say? Well, you know, it's unnecessary.
Did you have to do that when I typed it into the group, or when Joelle typed it into the group? Did you have to go through those gymnastics?
I know, I've known you for 15 years.
So okay.
I don't know that guy. You know,
I understand. But my point was
you
that
just pointed at me on my screen, by the way.
the context in which
that's relevant.
It was an examination context. I don't think there was ever any question in your mind how these words were being used. In fact, I think you used a word today that could very frequently be employed against women.
Yes.
But it was in an academic context. And I don't think anybody questioned your usage or had to go through these gymnastics.
So unless you're are you saying that you're only using it with people that you know?
No, what I'm saying is that to use the word is to employ it in the toxic, and if you don't want to use weaponized, in a toxic fashion. No one should do that.
We're all agreeing. We're all agreeing with that.
No, you didn't agree with it. You're saying that it's okay, like for black people.
No. Well,
that's what I've heard you say.
So you're.
I'm saying no one should use it that way. No one. I'm saying it's not okay if you've been a victim. That doesn't make it okay for you to victimize others through using that language.
So what I'm hearing then is well, if I can't use it, nobody can.
No,
and you don't get to make that rule.
No. I'm not saying nobody gets to use it because I don't get to use it. I'm saying nobody should use it for the same reasons that I shouldn't use it, because it's toxic or weaponized, choose your word, and it has been used for years to degrade and repress and suppress certain populations. And it doesn't make it okay if you were a member of that population. Just like the first slave owner in America was a black man, that didn't make it okay to keep slaves. It just meant he was the guy on top. What I'm saying is that when it's in rap music, it's in, Def Comedy Jam, in whatever context, in the movies, it's not okay to use toxic language.
Joel's trying to get in.
Okay.
There is no positive example of the use of nigger. None. Nothing positive. There's
just
neutral. Like, no.
No, that wasn't.
Just playing.
That's neutral, and that's why I used it, because that's neutral. But there's no positive example of the usage. And that's what Casey is getting at there. And I totally agree with it. If you can't, if it at the very best, it can be used academically, completely neutrally. And at the very, like anything other than that very best example is bad, is negative, then no, nobody should use it.
Yeah, that's my thesis, is that nobody should use.
So
toxic
let
language.
me approach this a little bit differently. Then I would say that the usage of the word is inside of the group that it applies to. The tolerance of them being able to use it is up to them to decide. For example, inside the Black community over the last few years, there's been an effort to get rid of the word nigger. Okay, and I can. There's other words that I've seen popping up in its place that are even more offensive. I got called a coon last month.
By who?
By another Black person.
I mean, did that? I hope that wasn't okay with you.
No, it was a weaponized attack, and I find, and it's disgusting.
Okay.
It's disgusting. I'm not a fan of Black people using nigger in jokes or anything else. Although Quentin Tarantino seems to use it excessively in every fucking movie he gets a chance to.
This is why I said I think we're in violent agreement on most of this.
Yeah, but I'm getting at those taking the race context of it, just talking in terms of weaponized words or toxic words. It's not. It's for what I'm saying is like for you to try to talk to Black people to say you guys should stop using nigger with each other. That's not going to work. That's the same thing. Same thing with the Confederate flag issue is a fight between white historians and white races.
I was going to bring this up.
Black people have been trying to get people to stop using that fucking flag for 150 years. But until white people start confronting white people about it, nothing's going to happen. If women want to use bitch with each other, that's a fight for them to have to make them stop using it. And that's not for me to ride in and say, well, it's not right for anybody. You shouldn't be using it. I can't. I don't get to have that fight. They should have that fight, and I should champion. I should be out here ready to support and champion. But it's a fight within that group. Okay, now I'm done.
No, I mean your point is compelling, I think. But what do you think, Joel? I have thoughts, but I'm gonna wait for you.
That was all over the place. But basically what I'm hearing is that because we are telling you that you are not allowed to use the word, you are not allowed to say that anybody else is not allowed to use the word, and so like there's circular reasoning there is what I'm seeing. And while I understand that is.
Go ahead, I'm listening.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, he has the wireless headphones on.
Okay, no, I was just like, okay, you gotta go take a piss? Like, what's going on?
He also has children running amok in the house.
Sorry, I honestly, like, I apologize, I'm late. I was finishing my D&D character, so.
Well, this was never intended to be like, you gotta be here too. It was intended to be like, come in whenever you want. Like, if anybody else pops in, that'd be great.
But the thing is that, while emotionally I want to be like, nobody should use it, and honestly I believe that emotionally I believe that nobody should use it, but it is a word that exists. And so even if only simply for that neutral academic reason, it's accessible to everybody, and we have to accept that. Is there any good reason for anybody to use it? I mean, I'm all ears. Like why would you want to, even in the Black community, why would you want to? Why do you want to compel that speech?
Well, that was the point of my Bill Hicks post, was to show that he was using it as an extreme example of how even the most obviously racist motives weren't enough to compel this jury to convict Rodney King's, attackers. He was using the absolute most racist language he could come up with to demonstrate that point. Now,
Right.
Ben Ostrowski made a point that he could have used other language. He was making a point in a satirical way. He was showing that, hey, I am the absolute biggest racist, and yet they still won't convict me. That's what
he was doing what comedy and satire does best, which is to reach for the most immediate example, the one that hits home immediately, and using that, and that's totally reasonable.
So in art, and comedy is a form of art. So vulgarity has its role in language.
Absolutely.
Vulgarity, God bless the Romans, vulgarity has its role in language, so, fuck, shit, all, the 7 words that you can't say on television, they have their word and emphasizing a point or adding clarity to a topic or whatever, and that's what he was doing. He was being vulgar for a point.
Right.
In his comedy bit, he was being vulgar for a point. Go ahead.
What I would like to do is do away forever with this whole question of why would any white person want to use that word? Again, use. My answer to that question would be, there is no good reason for anyone to use that word. However, to examine the word, to say, hey, listen, this is a word, like she said, that exists, and we need to figure out what the ethical implications of it are. It helps to not tell people, hey, listen, we can talk about this word all you want, just don't say it, because it's not this isn't Harry Potter.
I don't think anybody's opposing your position in that way, Casey.
Well, no, there actually was.
Well, Harold does. He's saying,
but no, there was also I can't remember who it was.
My point.
Somebody else came in and said, Jill came in and said, shouldn't utter it, even think the word.
Oh yeah.
Fuck, all right.
But it does seem to keep coming back to, well, if I can't use it, nobody can. And what I'm saying is, I shouldn't use it. If I'm not in that group, I shouldn't use it.
So look, I don't think anybody should murder. But I'm not saying because I can't, nobody can.
Let's not drift that far off. We're talking about language.
But you're saying that my position and those who are on board with my position are saying you shouldn't be able to use the word because I can't use it. What I'm saying is no. Nobody should use the word, all for the same reason. Because as we've, I think, resolved, there is no positive usage for the word.
If it is objectively bad, then it is bad, period.
And I'm saying for these kinds of words that are particular to groups of people, then the fight over the use of that symbology is for that group of people to resolve.
I haven't really disputed that. I think that is a good argument that you're making. Here's the only part that makes me a little bit nervous is the implication that the rest of us outside of that group are now somehow restrained from discussing the word.
Not discussing it. Let's throw that. Not this. Because when would you be discussing it? Besides talking about the title of a book,
I started an entire discussion group called the Skeptics Den so that we could discuss traditionally contentious topics that we don't necessarily need to reach outside the entire world, that we can channel into academic discussions of difficult topic.
Yeah, I'm with you, but I'm saying like for the word fag, when would you be just happen to be having a casual discussion about the word fag?
Right now,
No,
none of us in this.
but besides this, besides a discussion that we're having about the use of these kinds of words,
But
when in the last year?
But this
When
is
in the
what I'm
last
talking
year?
about. I'm here to talk about toxic weaponized words, and that's
I
what
know, but that's not what I mean, Casey. Over the last year, 5 years of your life, when have you been? When besides this meeting, when have you been casually discussing the use of the word fag?
Never, but that's not because it doesn't merit discussion. I think it's just because
No, I'm not saying it doesn't merit discussion. That's my point, though, is you're saying, well, you can't stop me from using it in discussion. When are you casually discussing nigger? When does it come up?
haven't you and I sat over lunch and had this conversation?
Yeah.
You and I have sat over lunch and talked about this type of thing.
It's not what I'm. You're not.
But that's the answer to your question. Is that, you know, when the context is appropriate, when you're speaking to someone who understands that this discussion is not employing the word, that we're actually discussing the word itself, not using the word to discuss other things, then I think that it's appropriate. And I think that those of us outside of that demographic shouldn't feel like we have shackles on, or that we're going to be demonized for having the discussion.
An academic discussion is one thing. That's not how this typically comes up, though. And when people and I think we have had this conversation before, where I've said when people take this position on things, the issue is typically that they're trying to justify their use of it otherwise. You know, take Todd's use in the when he was talking about there's two niggers in a boat and such and such. That was him attempting, wanting to get away with using it.
Todd Rogers?
Yeah.
Okay. Honestly, I don't remember that. I never saw that. I don't think.
Yeah, there was the whole thread about it was a similar discussion, and in fact, I think I started the conversation, but he had said, okay, so there's two niggers on a boat and such, and somebody says is that offensive? Would he, or what about if they're quoting Mark Twain? No, fucker. When he used it, he knew what he was doing. What he wanted was a free shot. A free opportunity to use the word and to be able to throw it out loud. What I think has been one of the responses I posted is you're just not used to being told no. Women and minorities have lived under a kind of an oppression forever. Can't do this, don't do that, can't do this. But when it happens to white people or white men, they're like, what do you mean I can't? Why can't I? How dare you? How dare you say I can't?
I mean, so.
Are you trying to jump in, Joelle?
No, I'm really just thinking about that for a moment. I'm turning it around. Like okay. I'm just rolling it over.
I think the only my only concern with everything you just said is that it ascribes motives that aren't necessarily there. In other words, I don't remember Todd saying those things. I'll take your word on exactly what he said, but what I can't necessarily take you at your word on is how charitably or uncharitably you've ascribed his motives. So I take your word at the words that came out of his mouth or on the screen, but I can't be certain that you are being as charitable as possible with his motives for typing them out, because you seem to be jumping to he was looking for a free chance to be racist, of like a get out of racism free card. Is like you kind of jump to that, and I don't necessarily think that's
that now you're back to my original argument that when somebody uses the word, I now have to go through these mental gymnastics of what's the motivation behind them using the word right now.
Well, if I had seen the comment, or if I remember the comment, I could probably do that a lot easier.
It's okay. let's assume for a second that he said that in that way, trying to say, you know, anyway.
Exhibit A, right? He was.
Yeah. Oh, hold on. Somebody's coming back in the room. I gotta do my duties here. Okay.
I think I made a matter of fact. I want to bring up a point that I had made. Hey, that's Rogers right there. Hey. What's going on, man? So I did make a point in my.
We can't. Are you saying something, Todd? We can't hear you.
No, he's not saying anything. I made an earlier point in my post with the Bill Hicks post where I said, look, you know, there are people who watch child pornography because that's exactly what they need to do in order to prosecute those who produce it and those who consume it. Now, simply the act of simply watching it is not consumption. If you're a lawyer, if you're a defense attorney, or if you're a judge, or if you're a member of a jury, you are not consuming child pornography by watching it. Instead, what you are doing is you are examining it.
Right.
So
we agree with you. We
so
agree
you
with
can
you,
make an informed decision.
I don't think anybody's against you on that one.
Right. So again, to relate that here, you know, I think it's important to understand that to put up a word or a phrase or anything that's weaponized, to put it forward as Exhibit A and say, listen, this is the type of thing that we're talking about. What was it? 2 niggers in a boat or something. This is Exhibit A. Boom, here it is. You have to type the words to put Exhibit A, just like you have to roll the film to examine it. You have to put the words up to examine them. So what I would say is when you see something like that, I would be very careful to be like, okay, I'm going to be as charitable as I can in my interpretation of what this person is trying to accomplish, rather than jumping straight to, oh man, he's looking for a get out of racism free card, you know, or get out of misogyny or whatever, you know, get out of bigotry free card.
My point is, you can avoid that whole mental gymnastics by not doing it in the first place.
You could say, well, you could avoid the child pornography thing by not displaying it.
I wish you wouldn't jump that far outside. We're talking about words. We're talking about language. We're talking about weaponized words. Now, we're not talking about child pornography. We're not talking about murder. We're talking about weaponized
my
words.
point is that
I know what your point is. I'm saying let's keep it in the context of language.
Okay, to examine something, language.
I agree with you, Casey.
You have to exhibit it.
I agree with you, Casey. That's not what. So the people that take your argument what I end up seeing, that's about speaking for the whole world, is what they're saying. Well, they get to say nigger, so I get to call my friend nigger. You know, as a white guy, I get to say. I should be able to get to say it too. If they get to say it, then I get to say it, and you can't. How come it's not fair for them to be able to say it and for me to not be able to say it?
I really feel like that's an assumption that you're like just placing on people.
No. Well, I would say my life experience would trump your assumption.
Okay, then let me state at the outset that if you see anybody doing that, I absolutely disagree with it from the outset. I'll give you that one. Mm-hmm. I'm full agreement with you. Nobody should say, look, if you can say it, then I should be able to say it. Just like, you know, if you can beat your children, then I can beat my children. No, no.
Jumping outside.
I'm using it as a analogy, because if someone else is doing something wrong, that doesn't give you license to do it. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't. But my point is that it is wrong. It is wrong.
And the only part that we disagree on is on flavors of it. The only thing I've said is like I talking about black people and the use of that word. I don't like it either. And there's been a whole movement against it about, you know, not doing it in comedy shows, not doing it in stage performances, that kind of stuff, you know, outside of the historical context of it. But that fight is a fight within the African American community.
Do I get to say that I agree with those people though? Do I get to say, hey man, I agree with you?
Sure. Yeah, okay. Sure.
Well, I do.
But the reach only goes so far. Just like misogynistic words, just like transphobic or homophobic words. That's I have a ton of gay and trans friends. Yeah. And if I hang around them and she says, "Oh, you old queen, such and such," or you're a dirty fag, you know what? They get to have that banter between themselves, and for me to jump in, oh, you shouldn't say that. That's not a good word. You shouldn't. That's not my place. That's not my role.
But I guarantee there are people that would condemn you for having used them just now. I'm not one of them, but I guarantee there are.
Okay.
And I'm on board with you. I think that, you post it for examination. As far as I know, nobody in this discussion is gay, but yet we bring the word up because we are examining it and we are discussing why it's wrong to use these words.
I think we're
any weaponized word would fit.
Right, and in that respect, I believe we're all on the same sheet, unless somebody says something different. We're okay for the purpose of an objective discussion of the words. The use of the words is allowed. That's
examination of the words.
Right, the examination of the words themselves is okay.
Yeah.
But the issue that comes up, and what people use this discussion for is that if they get to use it, I should be able to use it too. So that's where you and I are coming at the topic from different ends.
Well, I agree with you on it. I agree.
Yeah, and what they're offended by is you can't tell me what to. It's not fair for them to be able to say it and for me to not be able to say it. How dare you try to restrict my language?
Okay, yeah, I'm not on board with that. So, who else?
Anybody? Our new guest, Todd. Anything you want to add to this discussion?
Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't use them very often. Let me start off. It's just a little odd to see an active duty commissioned officer with a goatee. I guess it would be odd to see active duty anybody with, I can understand being in the field and shit just grows out for a little while, but like you shaped it and you have conference calls every now and then, right?
I'm making the transition. This is called my transition beard.
Yeah. All right. Well, when do you separate?
Officially on September 1st of this year. Right now I'm PTAD, and I am at my appointed place of duty right now. So
right. All right. Cool. So back to the topic. I just read something about this today, and there's a short but helpful Wikipedia on use versus mention, and the distinction. And like the use versus mention distinction actually dates back like thousands of years, and the idea it's one thing to use a word, another thing to mention a word, and they have different implications. Using a word, and they had some pretty funny, like simple examples. Like they said, copper, like the metal. Copper is a 6-letter word, but then they went and said copper is really good for making electrical wire, something like that. Like, okay, one of them is just explaining what the word is. The other one is actually using the word. And one could be very, well, not in the instance of copper wire, but use, it's like, I don't know, you can think of it like a weapon. You can use a weapon, slash somebody, a sword, or you could just go, there's a sharp sword over there. One's gonna hurt somebody, the other one is just a metal object sitting over in the corner. And that conversation, just I didn't even know that it was a thing. Obviously, it's been a topic in the group for a little while. I just had no idea that, like, there was debate that dates back to like the ancient Greeks, and that they can't. I mean, it's almost like it's settled. But
I think it should be, but it's obviously not.
Yeah. So, anyhow, that's all I got on it.
I don't think that any of us are really disagreeing on a lot of this here.
How about for the OP about the race car driver? Anybody have any thoughts on his casual usage?
Yeah,
it wasn't casual. It wasn't casual at all.
He got fired because he should have been fired.
Yeah.
Yeah, I say if you're going to be, a bigoted asshole, then suffer the social consequences for it.
So, okay, I'm taking the opposite. How do you know what his intent was?
Because he aimed it. That's what weaponizing words is. He took aim. He was calling someone out of frame a nigger. That is aiming. That is destructive use.
Doesn't get more clear
I
than
don't
that.
know how
It
much
might
more
have even been a
simple
white
it
guy
is.
that he was talking to, and that's just a nickname he has for him. I still wouldn't be okay with it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Would have been easier if you just called him asshole.
For real.
Well, yeah,
Had he called him asshole, he'd still have a job. You know?
yeah. There was no excuse for it. There's no rationale. There's nothing. You pay the social price. Pay the price. There should have been a price. There should have always been a price.
I would think he would argue that for him it was the same as calling the guy an asshole, and he wasn't trying to be racist about it.
Then you should have called him an asshole.
And now we're back to
Okay,
you avoid by him saying asshole instead of nigger, he'd still have his job. He'd be okay. He would have avoided all of this had he just not used the word.
And honestly, like to a degree, I think that he shouldn't resort to name calling to begin with. The way that I teach this to my kids is you can say fuck all day long, but the second that you call somebody a fuck, you're using that word, you are aiming it at a person, you are using it destructively, you are not allowed to weaponize words that way. Does that make sense? When you start aiming your language at a person, directing it solely at them, that has effects, direct effects.
Yeah.
So yeah, even calling him an asshole, it's wrong. Yeah, it's bad objectively, like even without any question. Now, emotionally, because of the background of using nigger, like it, of course, that feels worse. And maybe it is, and maybe it isn't. That's a completely different discussion right there. But the second you aim a word at a person, it has a reaction.
Well, it is worse. It is worse. It's worse. I mean, maybe there'll be a point in American history 500 years from now when everybody who suffered at the hands of racists and terrorists will be dead and gone, but that's not the case right now. And so there is a component, a toxic, weaponized component to the word.
We just have to breed all you white people out. That's it.
Well, that's actually probably coming.
It's happening. There's nothing we can do to stop it.
Yeah, I mean,
It's just.
I can't help it. My kids have this what they call sand. What they call
Kinetic sand.
Kinetic sand. Yeah, and they had a big bag of red kinetic sand and a big bag of blue kinetic sand. And if you went out there now, you would see one color. It's purple sand.
Yeah.
And that's because somehow over the week or two that they had it, any red and any blue is gone. Mm-hmm. It's all purple. And I think that that's just where we're headed as a species, as a human species. Oh, hey, Lily's here.
I know that one.
Yeah.
I know that one.
Hi, Lily.
Hi, Lily.
That's Todd Rogers.
Oh, that's Todd. Hey, Todd.
Well.
I did not recognize you.
She doesn't hear anything because I've got the headphones on.
Yeah.
Well, we can say anything we want to her. Yeah.
You should hear what they're saying about you.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, you're a bleep, 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 and a bleep, bleep.
What is the guy with blue shirt saying?
Yeah.
You're an angry black man.
There's two guys with blue shirts. All right. All right.
So when I got a good buddy in San Diego. So like when I go out there every couple of years.
Yeah.
Hang out, college buddy. And what's interesting is that I notice, just because I live in like rural, semi-rural, when I go to a place like that, everybody has this different flavor of brown skin. Because you have like Chinese people and Filipino people, you got Mexican people. And I just noticed that when you're like standing in line somewhere to like get beer or something, there's a sort of, I don't know, like a multi-ethnic skin tone that I don't see where I live. And when I said to my buddy one time, I'm like, dude, everybody out here is like got some sort of shade of brown skin. He's Irish. I mean, he's just as white skinned as me. And he's like, what are you talking about? He didn't notice it because he's around it. That's just where he lives. Where I live, it's just white farmers. I'm like right on the edge of Indianapolis, but right on the edge of the farmland. And there are people that have lived here for 150 years, and they're just just white farmers, you know? And within minutes of being out there, I'm like, man, everybody out here, there's nobody that looks like me. And to the point, the reason I make this is because there's going to come a point when that mix will be just people. Like,
And I think it'll
won't
be
notice it.
worldwide.
Nobody will notice it.
I think it'll be worldwide over
Yeah.
time, personally. Yeah.
Well, it's bound to happen. You know, the more populations mix in.
Yeah.
I have a language question for you guys.
You, front row, what's your question?
So we've been talking about, like, okay, weaponizing words, fine, great, and academic usage and all of that. How do you guys feel about when somebody uses a euphemism, like, you know, saying the N-word or the C word or whatever? Like, what do you feel about that? And I'm asking for your emotional response, because honestly, that offends me. I feel infantilized when somebody says that in front of me.
It's interesting you say that, because I was going to ask Steve the same question about infantilizing demographics by using, you know, watered down words that mean the same damn thing.
Right.
Just watering down
Everybody
the
knows
language.
what it means. So why are we watering it down? Like, why are we infantilizing that? It like, it's offensive to me.
I'll be right back. I've got to take a P word.
Good, now let's talk about him.
Yeah,
Well,
I learned a new word today, and the word is expurgation. And expurgation is taking a potentially inflammatory word and substituting something for it. N-word.
Less inflammatory.
Yeah, I'm just expurgating. And like, I hear that, and I'm like, I'll sit in a meeting, or I'll be in a conversation, and somebody will expurgate something. And I try to keep a straight face, but I kind of want to go, wonder why he went for the alternative, the safe word.
Yeah.
I wonder, like, he maybe is that word dangerous? Then I get ADHD, and then I'm like, I've lost focus on the conversation. Now I trailed off into, and all I hear is wah wah, Charlie Brown teacher, blah 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 blah, and like, what? Oh, I was focused on what you said.
I actually have a really great example of this.
Please.
So I when I met my ex-husband, he was a band director in Holbrook, Arizona's little Route 66 town. But the point I'm making with bringing that up is that it's a Mormon town. Okay. The entire town is about 80% Mormon, about 20% Native American. And because it is a Mormon-ruled town, about 6,000 people, they hold the standard on morality. So kids at the middle and high school levels, which is what he was teaching, and I was involved with these kids, you know, of course, you know, the common lingo, something sucks, okay? But because of the Mormon moral standard, they weren't allowed to say the word sucks at school, okay? So one of the Mormon teachers suggested that instead they use the word hoover. It doesn't suck, it hoovers. And no matter how many times I heard that, how many times it was explained to me, every single time, I just, like, I died a little inside, because I'm like, everybody knows what you're saying. Like, it's the same thing. Just say the fucking word.
Yeah. Penn and Teller, when they had that bullshit series on Showtime years ago, did an episode on profanity. And there was this lady that was like all anti-profanity. And she said she had all these like alternate words that she would use for, like, instead of bullshit, it was like, you know, la vaca or what. It was childish. And of course, Penn and Teller were pointing that out. That's like, everybody knows what you're saying. You're not fooling anybody, and you're not, all you're doing is, like you said, infantilizing other people. But yeah, I was going to actually bring that up. What do you think, Steve? I mean, does it make it okay? I mean, does that change anything?
I've really been trying to digest this and try to think of how I feel about it. There's different aspects of this. One is, I think that this is part of the and I'm not going to stay on this for a long time. This is part of the argument that I've heard from Trump supporters is their rail against being politically correct. They feel like the country has gone too far to being politically correct, and it's mostly aimed at them on the words that they can't use, and people are so sensitive now that if you say something, but they also aren't taking into effect the damage that they've been able to impart on others since time immemorial, and I think I put it in one of the threads. I had a coworker, a master gunny. He's like, oh man, everybody's so fucking sensitive. Used to be you could just say whatever. Now I've got to be so politically correct. And so periodically, in the few months before he retired, he would say something, and I would make a comment that, well, of course you think we all look alike. He go, oh God, Steve, I'm not like that, man. Come on, man, we've known each other for 20 years, man. I'm not like that. And some time would go by, and I say, well, of course you don't, of course you got a little dick. You're a white guy. Oh, goddamn, Steve, that's not fair. You can't say that. And so then finally, later on at the end, I was like, okay. So the same way you don't want to hear, you don't want to hear those comments, other people don't want to hear you saying fag, queer, nigger, and all that. They don't want to hear that from you. But it wasn't relevant to him until I used it on him. It didn't mean anything until he heard it used against him. Okay, so that's part of that. The other part of my answer is we're in an interesting point in time where we're transitioning, where language is transitioning, and we've gone from the pendulum being all the way over here to where Joel could call me nigger in the street and there's nothing I could do about it. Right? This is my lifetime ago.
I guess my skin's white enough. Yeah, I could have.
This is not ancient history. I am older
60s.
than legal interracial marriage.
Yeah.
Okay, this is not ancient history. We're not going back to slavery. This is my lifetime. We've gone from that. Hell, we had KKK recruiting at my high school. That was 1982. When I joined the Marine Corps in 1982, Marines were openly telling nigger jokes.
Yeah.
This is my lifetime ago. So we've gone from that to N-word. And somewhere, give it another decade, somewhere we'll settle somewhere in between, probably. But that's the evolution of language.
Hey, Casey.
Go ahead, Joel.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Joel, you're
Sure.
up.
Okay.
Oh, no, it's okay. Go right ahead, Todd.
Do they still call women Marines WMs, or is that gone?
No. They put the kibosh on that shit. I think
that was years ago.
What about dark green Marines?
2000.
Dark green, light green, not doing that anymore either. Marines, just Marines.
So General Jones, when he took over, I think in 99 or 2000, put the kibosh on WMs, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it was the next commandant that said, hey, we're not doing light green, dark green. Or I think it was actually the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps that came out with no more light green, dark green. That was about 2002, 2003. I remember being against that. Like, I was like, okay, first of all, to use a descriptive term is now off limits. To describe, what are we going to say next? Hey, don't say short Marine, tall Marine. No, just everybody's a Marine.
But Casey, you have to understand that was a step forward. So when I came in the Marine Corps in '82, we were still light green, dark green Marines and stuff like that because they had just done 10 years of forced integration of the Marine Corps, and that was the evolution to keep you from saying nigger.
Okay, I get it, but was the term dark green Marine ever weaponized? Was it ever used against you at any point? I'm saying we got to dark green to make them stop saying nigger. Okay, but
that was the evolution of the language.
So that's a good thing. My point is, if you got two Marines standing by the tree and I say, hey, go hand this to the dark green Marine.
Right.
Is that in any way degrading, weaponized, toxic?
No.
It's a description. Okay,
right.
So when the Sergeant Major came out and said, hey, we're not doing this anymore,
right.
That was my argument was, why are we assigning a moral indictment on language that is not toxic? Why would we do that? Why are we banning terminology that is not toxic and never?
I think you're looking at it the wrong way. I think it was it was a positive in that it was, again, more the evolution of we don't need to do that anymore. We've done it for the last, 20 years because of what happened for the last 40 years before that. So now we've gone past that. We've gone from talking about women Marines to just saying Marines, the WMs. I remember women Marines having their own barracks,
Yeah.
and then we went from that to having a women Marines floor.
So
And
Joel,
now
They were on the third floor.
yeah, Joel, just so you understand, when I came in the Marine Corps, the term WM was used to describe female Marines.
yeah.
The leadership put the kibosh on that around 2001, and we're not allowed to say WM anymore. You can say female Marine,
Right.
but you can't say WM. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So and I had 2 points here that I wanted to make, and I kind of wish Mike was still here. Don't put me on that, please. Is that the first thing is, when we were saying about using one word to replace another, I mean, obviously it holds a lot less clout if I look at Steven and I call him, literally, I say, you're an N-word. Like, that doesn't
Well, because
hold
you're
any
using
clout.
the word.
No.
Right.
When I literally say N-word, yeah, when I use the euphemism, it does not hold as much clout. Because it's infantilized. Now, but we get talking about this politically correct speech, and Stephen made a point of how specifically he's seen it, with the Trump supporter crowd, that group of people, and I totally agree. The one thing that I don't like about political correctness as a term is that it's used as a blanket statement, even on things that are just linguistically or socially evolved to include more grace and acceptance of the people around us. Like it's basically, it's the modicum of courtesy that we give to one another. And because it's change, it gets lumped into political correctness. Am I coming through?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I didn't quite understand whether you're indicting the term or whether you're embracing
I don't like
it.
the term politically correct because it's used in a negative way. Even when, because I mean, I can think of some places. I mean, just like what you mentioned, Casey, of not necessarily dark green or light green, not necessarily being condescending or negative in its usage, but they put the kibosh on it anyways because of whatever external forces. And that's kind of like, shrug your shoulders and go, well, that's weird. But like, it's not necessarily like, that is what I would picture as the negative intonation of politically correct. Whereas no longer using the word fag, well, that's just being a courteous human being.
Right. Everybody who I've ever heard say I'm not politically correct is basically using it as an excuse to be an asshole.
Exactly.
Yes.
Everybody.
Yes.
Everybody.
Yes.
Because those same people who say I'm not politically correct are the same people who will condemn Colin Kaepernick for not standing up during the national anthem. I'm like, bullshit. You tell me you're not politically correct.
I just got into this with one of my Marine buddies. We were talking about an older conversation that we had, and he had thought I'd called him a racist. I said, no. My issue was you were willing to stop watching football in its entirety because Kaepernick was kneeling, but you have shit to say about what he's kneeling about.
Right.
You have absolutely zero to say about systematic bias and what's happening, but you're willing to completely stop watching football because this guy kneeled in protest. Those are the same people that'll claim not to be politically correct. Right.
But
Yes.
you better stand during the national anthem.
Yeah.
But they don't stand in their living rooms.
No, because it's all bullshit.
One guy said another Marine buddy. Oh, this has been so educational watching my Marine buddies and what they post, what they're willing to post online, especially about political issues, Trump and what have you. been really educational. But one guy says, well, I'm all for First Amendment and free speech and right to protest. I just wish he'd do it in an undisturbing, nonviolent way. I said, like kneeling?
Yeah, I think I saw some of those conversations.
Oh, that's not the point. It's not the point. It's not the point. Entirely the point. But we were on. Is it infantilism or do I feel like no? Like I said, I don't think so. I also agree that using terms like what does Mike use? Oh God, I wish when Mike uses whenever Mike says identity politics, he's specifically talking about. He's trying to not say race or something like he's specifically using it against a particular party, but politically incorrect, kind of the same thing. A lot of times when the guys that I know that say I'm not politically correct, they mean they want to be able to say these things that they know will get the taste slapped out their mouth if they were to say it on the street. Yeah,
that's almost always the reason somebody says I'm not politically correct is so they can excuse their behavior. Almost always. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's exceptions, but almost always.
And so looping this back to the topic, I think that's.
Did you have something, Todd?
I was just saying that people just use it as a disclaimer. Like it's like you're going to tell a black joke and you go, I'm not racist or anything, but what do you
I'm not racist, but.
Right. But let me say this racist thing right now.
Yeah.
Right. No, exactly. I'm not politically correct is always a disclaimer for some
shield
shit that you shouldn't be saying or doing, and it's funny when the Kaepernick thing was happening because I used to call them Fox and friends that were in the cube next to mine. I used to love to go over there and be like, man, I didn't realize how politically correct you were, and I said, yeah, you're saying Kaepernick should stand for the national anthem. I mean, I didn't realize you were so politically correct. And then of course they
because it's a curse word to them. It's an offensive term to them.
Yeah. What do you think we're talking about? Standing for the flag is a political act. And you're upset that he's not doing it. You're upset that he's not politically correct. Either that or you just don't like the fact of a black man protesting. Which is it, And yeah, I actually got some amusement out of that, but
hey guys, I'm gonna take off. I'm tapping out. I gotta go check on some homework for my kids. So.
I gotta go too. I'm going to work.
Good talking to you.
Yeah, I mean we hit the hour point anyway, so I think we can probably shut this down.
So good discussions. Good discussion. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I'm glad we had we had Todd Rogers, Joel, and Michael Brulard show up. So I'll call it a win. Maybe we'll do this again sometime soon.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, have a good afternoon, everybody. See you.
Yeah, you too. Later.
And another thing, Casey's goddamn. Let me stop recording.